Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the What Are You Creating podcast. Today, another dear friend of mine and Next Level Mastermind member, Anne Michelle Francis, is joining me. Anne Michelle, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you, Cliff?
I have never been better. It gets better every single minute of the day. It seems like it was just several months ago that you and I were talking on, I think it was for the Cliff Ravenscraft show. We were talking about the power of mastermind groups, but this is a different podcast. The What Are You Creating podcast is all about telling the stories of people who are creating life on their terms, who are creating what they feel most called to create in this world. And you are a perfect example of somebody who knows what they want and is going out into the world and creating it. So, Anne Michelle, where would you like to begin to tell your story today?
Oh, my story probably begins back in 2020 when COVID shut the world down. And it shut us down and we didn't know what to do, where to go. So we went on vacation to Mexico. Um, on vacation to Mexico, I decided I didn't want to leave and I ended up staying for 2 years. And that was kind of the beginning of this journey where I had lived on the same street next door to my mom for 40 years. And then one day I went to Mexico and I just didn't come back and created an entirely new life, started chasing fears, started chasing things that scared me. And that opened this whole new world of limitless possibilities of being able to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, along with 4 kids in tow. So I would say that's where I start is Mexico.
Start in Mexico.
Mhm.
Well, you said that we went to Mexico. Who all went to Mexico? And then I'd love to talk about what was life like before Mexico.
Yeah, so I went to Mexico with my now ex-husband and our 4 children. And so we had been married for 18 years and we had sold our house and sold everything in it in California. And we were planning to convert a van and travel cross country. We went to Mexico first, and I just couldn't leave Mexico. I just felt like people were living, people were alive, they were outdoors, they weren't wearing masks, they were having sleepovers, my kids were making friends. They weren't on Zoom school. I put my kids in the local schools, and it was just life was going on there. So it's almost like my kids skipped COVID. And in California, it was very, very strict, very shut down, I think more so than the rest of the country. And so my kids sort of didn't know any of that was really going on. And we skipped it for a couple of years while we were there. And so it was an amazing experience being there. Life before COVID, I was the typical mom next door that would never go to Mexico and not come back. I was the mom that did all the things. I was the one that woke up early and taught bar fitness classes and then homeschooled my son from Panera Bread from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then went into work from 9 to 5 and would leave work during the day to go volunteer in the kids' classrooms. And then after school, we would do run club and soccer games and baseball games and skate park. And I was the fundraising coordinator and I was the soccer mom and I was team parent and I was all the things that you're supposed to do as a mom. I was leading cooking programs for my son because he had allergies. Um, and then one day, COVID shut it all down and we were all forced to stop and really reflect and say, what are we all doing? And so when I was in Mexico, it was just like none of that was a pressure anymore. We could just stop. We could hang out on the beach. We could surf and play in the water all day, do some school. And it completely changed my whole life being on dirt roads, hanging out with people that were always available, always wanted to hang out. And really personal connections became number one. And all these people that, while my story sounds unique, I was among people whose stories were all the same as mine. Everyone went down to Baja and just didn't come back. And we were all living this life together. So I created amazing friends through that. And now they are still some of my dearest friends, even though most of us have left.
So you said something just dropped in there, and I don't know why it's a curiosity for me, but you said I put my kids in the local schools. So are you telling me that your kids went to school in Mexico?
They did. They went to school in Mexico. The first year that I was there, I was homeschooling them. So it was Zoom school, but I was already homeschooling 2 of my kids. But another one, the third, was on Zoom school. The fourth wasn't in school yet. And so he was on Zoom and it was so miserable watching him. And so finally I pulled them all and was homeschooling all of them, which was challenging, but it was also COVID. So we were pretty relaxed, lots of beach time, lots of activities. And then the second year, when I when I was there because we came back for the summer, road tripped from California to Texas over a 6-week period because I was debating moving to Texas. I mean, why not? And then we came back and I decided, nope, I want to go back to Mexico for another year. Went back to Mexico and the kids, there was a lottery system and we got into one of the schools. So it was actually a private Montessori school that we were originally told would be bilingual. It ended up being mostly in English, but it was a great little school that both of my younger kids could go to and they had friends and we had a whole new community. It was almost like California, but then in Mexico, and without all of the crazy time commitments and over commitments to sports. Instead, it was just a community of like-minded people in Mexico. So yeah, they were going to school there for that second year that we were there.
So when I first met you, it was July of 2019. And the reason why I know that is because that's when I was introduced to the Prosperous Coach method for creating clients. And ever since then, I've kept a spreadsheet of everybody that I have given complimentary coaching sessions to and made proposal for the next level mastermind and one-on-one coaching. And your name and your ex-husband's name are both in July 2019. So
Mhm.
I got to know you from a professional standpoint through a couple of coaching sessions. At the time, your husband joined the next level mastermind, but you didn't.
Mhm.
And because I know you from that aspect, I'm interested in having you share your story of working with your dad and the work that you were doing, because even though you were what you say the standard mom next door or whatever,
Mhm.
there are hints, there were traces of who you are today and how you show up in the world that I was recognizing back then. So let's go into a little bit. What were you doing back in the day professionally outside of being mom and all of those other activities?
Sure. So I was married. I was working in public relations for a corporation, a few years out of college. I got married in 2004. I was still working a corporate job. My ex-husband was working a corporate job, and he had always had this dream of opening surf and skate shops. And so one day we sort of decided, let's open a surf and skate shop. And we didn't have a whole lot of planning that went into it. We just opened a store that actually was open for 8 years. So we opened that store. And around the same time, my father, who's a real estate attorney, came to me and said, hey, I'm buying this business that works in landlord tenant law. Do you want to run it for me? And he basically met my needs in terms of compensation. I said, okay, sure, I'll run it. I didn't think it would become my career or that I would be in it forever. So simultaneously, we opened a surf and skate shop in July 2005. And then I started working for my dad in August 2005. So the entire time that I've worked for my dad, I also owned surf and skate shops. We opened the first one, it was open 8 years, closed it for 3 years, and then opened another and another. So we had two opened at the same time. And then we ended up closing both of those during COVID. Simultaneously, I was also working for my father in the landlord tenant law space. Um, and being able to see the power that I had in the surf and skate shop, but then unable to make any changes in the law office side. And I could really see I'd been taking so many trainings and coaches, and I love learning, and I wanted to apply it to the landlord tenant law space. And I really wasn't able to because my dad was the boss and he did things the old school way. And so I was definitely an employee working for him, but worked for him for 18 years. And we owned surf and skate shops for 15 of those years. And then we ended up closing them during COVID and when I ended up going to Mexico and staying.
Yeah. Well, I
Mhm.
know what it's like personally, as you are probably familiar with much of my story. I also came from a family-run insurance business, and and I know what it's like to have the family business and to be the employee, and how making changes is like, oh, maybe one day when this is yours and I'm retired,
Mhm.
you run this place however you want. Yeah, I definitely get it. And I remember some of the conversations we've had privately about some of the challenges that you faced.
Yeah.
So you have this very eclectic background professionally.
Yeah.
You are what you call the standard mom next door, the mom next door. And then COVID changes everything. You go to did you say you went to Baja, Mexico?
Yeah, we were in
So
Baja.
you so you went to Baja, came home for a summer, but then went back. and then decided I don't want to go back. So tell me a little bit about this. And is this where the breakup happened between you and your ex-husband?
Not oh, so initially in 2020 when I went down there. So in 2020, that was when the breakup happened. We really went on vacation for a couple of weeks. I didn't want to go back. He wanted to go back to run the stores. Actually, we only were down to one store at that point. He went back to run the stores. I stayed in Mexico, and it was really that was the moment where we decided to sort of go our separate ways. So I remained in Mexico with the four kids and rented a car and started driving through Baja with four kids. And what was actually propelling me each day was doing something new that scared me. And driving through Mexico by yourself, with four kids and putting on the front of no, everything's going to be fine. Of course, I'm not scared. Was its own life-changing experience. And then as I did that, and we were traveling more and more, and then the kids, we kept going back to this one town in Mexico. We kept going back there. We started having friends there. And finally, the kids said, we don't want to drive anymore. We don't want to keep traveling. And so we ended up planting in one place, and we were there for 9 more months after I was really traveling and going all over for probably 3 months. So we planted there, and then we only came home because it was hurricane season. The weather's pretty terrible in Mexico during that time. The kids didn't want to be there during possible hurricane, and so we came back temporarily with the intention that I would be going back there in the fall.
So it sounds to me like COVID was the initiator of this trip. COVID lasted for quite some time when it came to the disruption of closing down businesses and things of that nature. What were you doing through this time frame for income or business, or was that a concern for you at the time?
Oh, wow. So if you're talking about COVID, so the time period before we went to Mexico, we were doing everything required that stayed in compliance with lockdown. We were doing curbside delivery. We were delivering skateboards to doors. We were showing up on live every time we got a delivery. The reason our stores closed was because we simply couldn't get the inventory anymore. The demand was there, but the supply was not. So we weren't even letting people in the store anymore, only because we didn't have enough inventory to have a retail store where people could actually shop. It wasn't because we couldn't bring them in anymore. It was just we couldn't get skateboards anymore. We were doing road trips 8 hours a day just to come back and bring product that we would sell through in an entire weekend. So our business was doing the best it possibly ever had. However, we couldn't get the product. And eventually we were just selling product that we weren't even loving anymore. And so that was really one of the biggest challenges that we faced during that time. And it took a long time for that to even correct itself. In the meantime, I continued to do landlord tenant law. However, there were a lot of restrictions. And so I wasn't even able to work. So there was a period of time where there was just no work. We couldn't really do much in terms of the legal side because courts were closed and completely shut down. And then with the skate and surf side, we weren't getting product. So that is actually, I signed up for a copywriting course and I learned to write. And I've always been a good writer, but I always hated writing. It was just not exciting to sit down and write for me. And I took this course that basically gave me permission that said, if you know all the rules, then you can break all the rules. And that was like, what? I can start a sentence with the word and. I can start a sentence with the word but. I can make a sentence that's only 3 words. It just changed the way that I thought, changed the way I wrote. And so I started applying that to the words I was using for the surf and skate shop. And it was resonating with people. People were understanding what I was saying. And I was looking forward to writing. So I was waking up at 4:35 in the morning and just sitting in a very quiet space, drinking my coffee and writing. And so while I transitioned to Mexico, the same thing was happening. I was writing, capturing it with a picture on Instagram, writing about it, and then sharing that. And people understood and they got it. And so that was where my true creativity, because I've never considered myself a creative person, that's when I started realizing how creative I am. And that opened some new doors for me. And I also started really inspiring people. And that was the game changer for me that made me keep on pushing, even through the things that I do today. I love inspiring other people. I don't agree with the word influencing people. I love inspiring them to take their own action to make changes.
I love that. There's something that stood out to me there. You mentioned that you took this copywriting course,
Mhm.
and the fact that you could break all the rules was invigorating to you. So much so that the excitement and passion for it got you up at 4:30 in the morning, compelled you to get out of bed, make a cup of coffee, and start writing. Prior to this, you said that you hadn't considered yourself to be a very creative person before. What stood out to me is the getting up at 4:30 in the morning. Prior to that experience, were you an early morning riser?
I have always been an early morning riser, and it was because of COVID that I was unable to go to the gym to work out at that time. So when I was teaching 5:30 a.m. classes, so I was up at 4 a.m. to go and teach classes. And again, that was my fun job. That was part of my old life where I made sure I had a completely full palate and had no breathing room for anything. And so I had a crammed day, but I would teach classes and or homeschool my son during those early morning hours. So once COVID hit and hours didn't really, time of day didn't matter anymore and bedtime didn't matter anymore, I was waking up, and instead of working out, I was sitting and I was writing, and I could work out any time of day now. But that quiet creative time, I could only find it in the morning. It was the only time when everyone was still sleeping. No one needed me. No one was emailing me. It was like the world was quiet. And so I could just write. And so now I don't do that anymore. I still I work out very early in the morning, but if I can find time in the evening, I love finding that quiet. I love just sitting on my bed and I open notes. For some reason, notes is motivating to me. I open my notes app. I write at the top the date and then I start writing. I actually ended up putting all of my writings together from 2020 through 2021 into a book, and actually printed a book. There's only one copy, but I did put it together and it was in chronological order. And so now that's how I continue to organize my thoughts, because everything I do is really it's all a process. It's all an evolution. It's all a transformation. It all has not a start and end point, but it has a start and end before a transition into the next point. And I've become very clear, and I actually have some of my journals with me. But an example is, over the last year, I've been on this major healing process, a healing journey. And one of my journals, I started writing it, and kind of when I get to the end of what I feel like is a wrap up, then I say, okay, it's time for a new journal. Even if there are 50 pages left in the journal that are blank, it's like, no, that served a purpose, and that chapter is done, and now I need a new one. And so then I started a new one. And actually right now I'm actually in that process where I'm about to start a new journal, because I feel like this last chapter is wrapping up and it's time for a new one.
So, what stood out to me there is the practice of journaling. I'm an avid journaler myself. Couldn't imagine a day without journaling. You said that prior to the copywriting course, you were not a creative person. Were you a journaler before you took the copywriting course?
Nope. It was my birthday, 2020, July 2020, when I wrote my first journal entry. And I wrote down how I was feeling, how depressed I was, how unhappy with myself I was, how every single day seemed like the same. And it was a really, really depressing entry, but that was my first entry. For personal, before I was learning to write for the business. So I was writing for the surf and skate shop to motivate and encourage and persevere through that time by finding this independent hobby you could do alone, which skateboarding and surfing were wonderful during COVID. You didn't need to do it with anyone. So this was the first time that I actually wrote for myself. And then I continued writing through that year. That was the year I was in Mexico. And then my next journal entry, July the following year, 2021, was a very, very different Anne Michelle, and how proud I was of that Anne Michelle. And so I make sure that I write a journal entry every year on my birthday. But in addition to that, my journal entries can be anything from a quote that just really, really resonated deeply, to listening to some sort of podcast or listening to a webinar or something where I'm learning something that's related to personal growth, self-development, self-awareness, and then I journal about it as part of that chapter. So I can really go back and see my entire process and my thought process during that time period of whatever I was experiencing.
So it sounds to me like you've had a fairly consistent time of journaling since this was implemented. And it sounds to me like you've just gone through and put together a book of putting these journal entries in chronological order. What have you found are the benefits that you've gotten knowing that you've documented this transformation over time? When you set back and you're going through these entries and reflecting back, what are some of the benefits that you are now experiencing that makes you so grateful that you did journal so consistently?
Um, Really to see the growth, to see that what I wanted 6 months ago or 9 months ago, to see how that's changed, how what I want now has changed, to see what I was stressed out about 12 or 14 months ago and how those things are not things anymore. It's become an embodiment of who I want to be and seeing that person that I wanted to be and then becoming her and having a clear plan of what she looks like so that I can become her, and having pictures of what she looks like or pictures of where she's gone or what she's doing to continue to guide me on that path. So looking back through all the journal entries, I can see, oh my gosh, look at this. I was so broken. I was so sad, or I was so intuitive, or there are just so many pieces of it. But also going through, for the last year, I have 3 journals so far that are complete to me. And so going through and saying, oh, where was my manifestation? And then pulling that out and then using that to guide me. And over the last month, realizing that manifestation doesn't fit me anymore. I need to do a new manifestation. Or having this I experienced an event about a month ago, running into someone who was important to me. And I went back and realized, wait a second, I have a friend that did a reading on me, and I wrote it down verbatim what she said. And so I went back to my journal. I found it. It was August 1st, I think, 2023. And I took a picture of it. I said, this has happened. You said, wait, you said I'll indefinitely be okay. Officially today, I am indefinitely okay. And so going through and seeing all of these things happen, there isn't a single thing that I haven't asked for that hasn't happened or isn't happening. And so it's exciting to see all of that laid out. So all of those worries going away. And also what I've learned through this is that that pain, that hurt is also necessary for me to feel immense gratitude. So when I'm sitting at my table and my daughter wants to make me coffee, she's 8 years old, and she brings me a cup of coffee. I said, Lainey, do you know what this brings me? And she said, it brings you joy. I said, not only does this bring me joy, but you bring me joy, and you bringing me this cup of coffee brings me joy. And this whole moment is, I have so much gratitude for. And so sharing that with my kids over and over, and I don't feel like I ever could have gotten to that side, to that moment of joy and gratitude without feeling the pain and the hurt, and writing it all down and learning to explore what gratitude and joy means.
What stands out to me right now as you share that, and I feel the immensity of that joy in that moment. I was there as you were describing it. But what stands out to me is that when you first started journaling, your first entry was how disgusted you were with how your life was at the time,
Mhm.
writing down just how depressed I am, how sad I am about what's not here, and just pouring that out, self-reflection. And I can't begin to tell you the number of journals that I've done like this as well. There, it stands out to me, one of the things that we had was a scenario where there was a season where financially a lot of things that could go wrong did, all at the same time. And then we got this bill from a hospital that my daughter went to the emergency room while she was at college, and this emergency room, this hospital was outside of our network. And so they sent us a bill, and I think it was, let's just say it was $12,000. And it says your insurance has rejected this, it's not covered. So here's $12,000. And I'm like, oh, this on top of everything else. And I remember I had a pretty decent habit of experiencing peace, love, joy, abundance, tranquility, but I was in a season where that was disrupted. Like I said, a lot of things that could go wrong all went wrong at the same time. And this piled on top of it. And so I went to my journal and I wrote one of those journals. I'm like,
Mhm.
I am so sad. I am so depressed. I'm so angry. I'm so upset. I'm so worried. I'm so filled with anxiety. There are lumps in my chest, in my throat. and this got it. And I wrote down, it's like, and I got this letter from such and such hospital, and it says this and all these things. And then I write this, I like, but here's what I know to be true. And then I start expressing my appreciation for the fact that my daughter received care. The fact that, while this was out of our health insurance network, the fact that we do have health insurance, and even, all of these different things that just how much I have to appreciate. And also the fact that I have a business and I'm not an employee where there's a ceiling on my income. And I have the ability to creatively come up with new ideas for a product where in a single weekend, I could either do a workshop and pay for this, or I could go get a new client, or all these other things. And so I started to feel the gratitude. I started to see a shift in my emotional state. And I'm writing all this. And I'm not kidding you. I said, so here is my prayer. Here is my desire. God, universe, this is what I want. A, have the hospital completely forgive the entire bill. That would be awesome. Or B, help me land a new client or a new project or something like that that wouldn't have come to me otherwise had I not taken some actions. And not only will that be enough to cover this bill, but it will actually start a chain reaction of more clients that would have never happened had I not. And that will just be extra income, and I'll be thankful for it. And I said, if you could make one and or both of these happen, that would be amazing. And what I love about journaling, Anne Michelle, is that because I can write these down, they're dated, they're in my own handwriting. And then 3 months later, I get by the way, within 90 days, I had a new client, and I was doing something I wouldn't have done had this not happened. The first client paid in full, and it would have paid for that bill, except for the fact that within 90 days, I also got a letter from the hospital that was sent to my daughter that said, hey, by the way, we understand your health insurance doesn't cover this. We understand that you're a student at the local university, and we have a program that people donate to forgive certain debts. And your debt has been completely wiped clean. So both things that I wanted came. And I have countless stories of this. And the reason why I share all of this is because I don't know that I would believe them if it weren't documented. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. And I've actually found it to be really, really important to date everything. Even when I write down a quote, I have to
Mhm.
write the date, because sometimes there'll be a month in between journal entries, and sometimes it'll be every single day I'm writing 8 times a day. And so I write the date because you want to have that perspective. It's really important to know, did it take 3 months for this? Did it take 6 months? But it always happens. That's the crazy part, is that it does always happen.
It does. That's been my experience. It's been your experience. And I would suggest that for some, it might be their experience if they gave it a shot. And Michelle, so tell me how, you know what? Something else I know about you, and I think it would be incredibly important to talk about how you created this transition from the just the normal mom next door to the mom that you are today, this powerhouse female entrepreneur. Before we go into what's shifted for you, what's changed for you, I'd like for you to also talk about your vision boarding, because this is something that you've been doing. And when did this start for you?
Again, I've never considered myself creative. I think I've thought about a board before and bought magazines and then look at it, and I'm just not inspired by anything because magazines have celebrities or food or whatever in it, and it just didn't inspire me. And then my daughter, my 19-year-old daughter, in January, I think she sent me a picture. She's like, "Hey, I made a vision board. What do you think?" And I looked at it and thought, wow, I can see exactly what you want this year. This is so clear. It was just so obvious, everything that she wanted, and it was cool. And I love the vibe. And I was completely, I wanted to make one myself. I was so inspired by her. So I said, well, how'd you do it? I don't even know where to start. I'm not creative. She's like, just go on Pinterest and create a board. I'm like, Pinterest, I've been saying this for 10 years. Pinterest gives me heart palpitations. I am not a visual person. I do not want to see pretty things laid out to try and be organized. So it really stresses me out. I am not the Pinterest mom. If one of my friends, Christina, is watching this, I literally would see things on Pinterest and send it to her and say, "Can you do this for me?" And I would just pay her, because she's the Pinterest mom and she's wonderful and she's done so many projects for me. But it scared me, and so I just did what she said, and I started searching things and started adding them. And then I screenshotted them and then sent them to Walgreens and printed them. And then in front of me, I had all these pictures that were not cutouts from a magazine, but instead were actual pictures of not me, but pictures of people doing things that I also wanted to do, or where I could see myself, or I could envision myself being. So every single thing on my board has this intention of I can see myself doing that thing or participating in that. And so then of all those, I shrunk them down, put them on, individually cut out the ones that I thought resonated the most. And somehow the board was calling me for where certain pictures had to go. So they're all on there very intentionally. And then there were certain quotes that called out to me. And so I put certain quotes on there, put it on the wall, and I wake up every morning. I see it every morning. I know what my mission is. After quarter one, I looked at it. I'm like, okay, I'm on track for these. I haven't even touched these. What am I going to do about that? How am I going to shift this? And so it's continuing to be like this tracker, this visual tracker. I even have a picture of a woman that's stand-up paddleboarding in my bathroom mirror. And my daughter asked me just yesterday, why do you have a picture of yourself on your mirror? I said, that's not me, that's someone, and I want to be like that. And she was really confused because she already thought that was me. And that's been a lot of the process that I've talked about too, is that last year I made this list of qualities that I wanted in a partner and I became all of them. And so that's also what this vision board is becoming all of these things that I've always wanted to be or never thought that I could be, or that's really what's been driving me. And then seeing that I can be all of those just with very clear intentions has been a really big game changer this year. It's been a lot of fun.
So you said 2 different times, "I've never been a creative person."
Mhm.
And you said that when you started journaling, and journaling started when? During your birthday back in
July
Mexico,
20,
right?
yeah, 2020, July. No, I was still at my house. We still owned our home then.
All right. And then the vision board started in January of what year?
This year, 2024.
Okay. So what I heard is back in July of 2020 in Mexico, "I've never been a creative person, but I began creative journaling.
Mhm.
And I've been fairly consistent at journaling all of these years. But
Mhm.
in January of this year, I've never been a creative person, but you've
Mhm.
been creative with all of these things." So, and Michelle, I'm going to ask you, it is now April 2024. Are you a creative person?
Oh, I haven't wanted to be. I think the other piece of it that I haven't wanted to be, I'm still channeling that energy. More recently, I am channeling it through writing again, but I am sharing it through my close friends feature on Instagram. So there are very, very few who are my closest friends where I am now essentially journaling and sort of sharing chapters of books through that. And that's giving me this form of creativity. And so I love writing, but my writing is so personal that I don't want to share it with the world. And so I'm getting this creative outlet. So am I creative? I don't know why I can stand in the mirror and say I love myself. But am I creative? That's a really hard one. I've never identified as that, nor have I wanted to. But
So,
I do
so I
things that are creative.
say that last line again. I didn't hear that one.
I do things that are creative.
I do things that are creative. I hear that. Okay. So there are a couple of things that I'd love. By the way, why are you on my show? If I'm on a this is a podcast for people who are intention about what they're creating in this world. I only invite creators, creative people who are creating things that most people would never dare even let people know that they have the thought that they want this thing, let alone go and actually manifest it.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is I've seen you as a creator since the very first time I spoke to you in July of 2019. So it's interesting because I've never not known you to be a creative person.
Mhm.
The things that you created in your professional career, in your dad's attorney business, it far exceeds the the designation that you held professionally. And you and I have talked about that in so many ways. It's like, listen, you're not just this. You've created so much. And if you look back, you notice that you created something special in those years that you worked in your dad's business and what you've done.
Yeah.
So, do you see, from my perspective, you're one of the most creative people that I do life with?
Aw, thanks, Cliff.
Are
Yes.
you able to see that reflected back to you?
I am. I'm able to see it from a creator standpoint. I think probably what bogs me down is that I don't want to call it comparisonitis because it's not like that, but I consider creators more the Instagram content producing creators. And I do that. I do it in a different method. So maybe it's just because my vocabulary is a little bit shifted, but
Ah, okay.
creative and creator to me have been different things, but I could see how the things that I do that are creative have made me a creator. And I've also been able to create my future. I mean, that's probably the most creative thing that you can do when you can literally live anywhere because you've created a business that's 100% remote with a fully remote staff. You can be anywhere. And so where I live and the way that I do life is completely with intention and exactly where I want to be and what I want to do. So that's pretty darn creative.
Yeah. That's interesting, because for me, the thought of and I understand there is, that I'm a creator, I'm a content creator, I'm a, and you said that you don't like the word influencer, but an online brand persona, personality out there trying to inspire the world. That is, and what I'm hearing, maybe you're saying, is I've never been that person. But what I'm hearing is that the phrases when you said I've never been a creative person, those phrases weren't tied to things where that would typically be associated with somebody who does this and creates a piece of content in hopes to inspire and or influence someone. No, it's like, no, I've never been a creative person who does visually creative things. I've never been a
Mhm.
person who does written creative works. But here's somebody who's been journaling for years, who's actually taken those journals and put it into a book format, even though there's only one copy. Here's somebody who is vision boarding, who actually has figured out how to do it finally with Pinterest, and also has these physical versions of it. And there's creative aspects of it showing up in bathrooms that daughters are asking you about. I mean, you're such a creative person.
I guess it's because I haven't identified with what I consider creative, which is art, which is music, which is songwriting, which is playing an instrument or creating something visually beautiful with art. I'm the person that, again, heart palpitations if I have to think about decorating my house. I mean, even what's on my wall,
Ah,
one of my
it's
creative friends told me what to put on my wall. So that is it, and it causes me stress to think about. I would just leave the
uh,
wall completely white.
okay, so we're talking about a semantic of how you define the word creative, and you're so for I by the way, I told myself I'm not a creative person as well, and I used to have a similar definition. Give me a pencil and tell me to draw something, and it's going to be terrible. I told myself that until one day during COVID, I decided I was going to go invest in getting some charcoal pencils, and I was going to get and all this stuff, and I've drawn some things that freaking blow my mind. I'm like, where did this come from? And you would, it's like, yeah. Matter of fact, it's on my Instagram history even. It's probably not too far back because I not on there as often as I'd like to be. But
Mhm.
anyway, so there's that. But I also, don't ask me to sing, because you're like, please, Claude, don't sing. So I get that, but here's what I'd love to do, not just in our conversation, but also for those who are listening. We're all artists in this world. For me, my art is the transformation in my life. My art is the way that I used to be this, but I now no longer suffer from these things. I have transformed this. So I actually have taken this raw material, I've worked this clay and built something that's more of an art form today. And that's my persona, or it's the way that I show up. It's the it my this is a creative work. And in a coaching session, in a conversation, if I can take somebody who is in a very poor negative state, and by the end of it, their emotional state is elevated and they've got access to their creative way of thinking, and they walk away with clarity about exactly what to do and actually found the answers within themselves. That's a piece of art that I just released into the world. So what I'd love to do, not just in our conversation with you, I'd just like for anybody listening, anybody viewing, expand our understanding of creative, because we all have an idea of in our mind. In my mind, here's what I'd love to have you and anyone consider. Has there ever been a time in my life where I wanted something that I don't currently have, and then decided I'm going to have that? I'm going to create that experience. And then you actually made that thing a reality. It doesn't matter if it's art or music or, rearranging beautiful pictures on a wall, visually, aesthetically appealing. I'm not into all of that stuff right now either. But anything that we have in our life that we don't currently have, but then we decide we want to have it and we're going to create it and it becomes a manifestation in the real world, we are creators. Anyway, I love that. And it's something I wanted to point out. All
Yeah,
right. So
that's huge. I think that I do that through discipline and consistency of what that is. So I think that the other part is the actual visual piece of creativity that I've always considered it. I've also never had a desire to be that, because I believe that I can be anything that I want if I put the time and energy into practice it. My own children are perfect examples of that. They're disciplined, they're consistent, and so the things that they do are blowing up because of how much they put into it. One of those things of becoming a quality for me has been being an athlete. And so the amount of time and energy I put into training, to lifting, to yoga, to handstands, to volleyball, to paddleboarding, is the hours and hours every week that I do that in my free time. I've chosen to do that over something that's, maybe visual graphics or something, but it's not that that's not something I know I could do. It's just I've chosen to do it in a different way. So absolutely, I've something that I've wanted, that I've just worked hard enough to get. I'm on that other side of getting it, and it's really, really exciting to see I can literally do anything I want.
yeah, your social media channel is something that I follow, and I see you out there doing your handstands today, free form. Whereas when I remember when you're first starting and you're kind of shaky up against the wall, and to see that, and that is your art form, and those are the things that I've witnessed over the years. So you talked about redefining for yourself what it means to be a woman, and what it means to be a mother, and what it means to be a female entrepreneur. Tell me a little bit about that reinventing yourself. What was that process like for you?
Well, a lot of this whole healing journey I've been on has really been looking back at my past, my childhood, and how I was raised. And I was the third of four children. And by the time I came along, my mom just didn't have the energy to put me in sports or to make me do anything that I didn't want to do. And I said make, it wasn't really even a conversation. It was, if I went to her and said, I want to play soccer or something, then I'm sure she would have signed me up. But I just never went to her and said I wanted to do anything, and she wasn't going to make me and didn't ask me. So I really didn't participate in sports. I didn't participate in anything that I didn't want to do. But I also wasn't necessarily offered to do things either. So aside from hanging out with my friends and hanging out with my friends, that's really all we did. So I grew up with this identity, especially going into high school, seeing, okay, there are the athletes and there are the theater girls and all the different people. And I wasn't in any particular group. I was just me and didn't have any special thing. Went through college, had a boyfriend in college, ended up getting married to not my boyfriend in college, but got married and was married for 18 years. And even through that, it was always his dream that I was carrying out. Okay, you want a surf and skate shop. Okay, I don't skate or surf. At the time, didn't skate or surf. And so, okay, let's follow your dream and what that is. So what I learned is I'm really good at having children, raising children, setting guidelines and boundaries for them, but I never had a thing. And that was actually a point of contention with my ex-husband because he didn't understand how there wasn't a thing that I wanted to do all day every day until I physically couldn't do it anymore. And even though I loved taking bar fitness classes and teaching bar fitness classes, he'd say, but that's not your hobby because you can't do that all day. I'd say, yeah, but I can talk to my friends after and have coffee and and there was a disconnect. He's like, but that's not the thing. Like, there needs to be something where you could do it all day, every day, because that was surfing for him. And it's really been, even through the transition of Mexico, I didn't even have it then. It's been this last year where I found all of these things that I love to do. That now, when I'm alone on a weekend, I do all of the things until my body's physically tired. And I'm like, I finally have arrived and I get it. And I realize now that life is more than just being about the typical mom next door. And also, when we had our surf and skate shop, my ex husband would talk to people all the time who would come in and say, oh, they wish they had time to get back into surfing or skating, but they don't have time because they're parents. And that was one of his things was, how do we get you back out there again? But people become so bound by, no, we have sports and we have the kids and all the things that the kids need to do. There's a quote that I'm thinking of. It's something like, sorry, don't mind me. I'm helping my child live their best life. It's like, well, what about you living your best life too? And so that's what more of this transition has been, is how can I show to my kids how to live the best life for me, while also encouraging them to live the best life for them, instead of the world only revolving around my children, which I think is one of the biggest problems. And that was what I was in the middle of when I lived in California. And it took moving to another country with people where self-care, self-awareness, and recognizing that was the priority. And that's what I brought back to me as I've moved back to California, is now I'm not that typical mom next door that doesn't have any of my own hobbies or just does an hour gym workout because that's all I have time for. Now it's full. It's a very full life of all the things that I've always wanted to do and never knew how and didn't have the time or energy to dedicate to. And now I have, because I've made it a priority.
So what are some of the things that you are doing for you today?
Oh, let's see. Well, I love doing cold plunges and sauna. So I love doing a 2-minute cold plunge, 20-minute sauna, 2-minute cold plunge, 20-minute sauna, and then end on the cold plunge and then going and get ramen after. And I love doing that by myself. I love going to the gym and, stretching first, doing the mobility exercise, practicing my handstands or my headstands, doing a hard lifting session, and then sitting in the sauna for 30 minutes after. And just a lot of reflection, listening to podcasts and learning new things. I love paddleboarding. I'm meeting more and more people out on the water. I have a dog now, and so I've taught my dog how to sit on the board with me. So now we go out with the dog on the paddleboard. That's on my vision board too. I didn't think we would get there. It took a lot of attempts, but we got there. Same thing with volleyball. It's like, and I'm constantly challenging myself. And tonight is another example of that challenge. There is this up-leveled volleyball class that I want to take, but I'm intimidated to take. And I've been wrestling with it all day and still haven't signed up for it yet. And it's like, I know I just need to do it because I do things that scare me. And when I do things that scare me, I show up and it's never even scary. And I've realized that all of these years, I was so worried about what people thought of me or what I looked like to other people. And finally, it's like, it really only takes looking dumb a couple of times before you start to figure it out. So instead of being scared, how do I just show up and do it? And so playing volleyball and then having friends that I play volleyball with, and then that morphed into pickleball, because when we can't find 4 people to play volleyball, there's like, well, let's go play pickleball instead. And then that turns into my kids saying, we all want to play pickleball, and then we can all go out together. Or line dancing. I literally don't say no to fun things now. And with that newfound energy, I'm also highly aware of the people I surround myself with that need to match my energy. And this new version of me, who I've never been a people pleaser, so it's not that that's ever been on my radar anyways, but I'm very forthcoming with, I want your energy to match mine. Because as soon as I start to feel like I'm being drained or sucked down, then I'm going to correct it. And we're either going to figure things out, change the topic, or maybe we're not hanging out again, because that energy is really important to me. And I've worked really hard to be able to find that and nurture that in myself. And I want to be around people that have that same energy to share.
You are a different person today. You're doing a lot more than you have ever done before. You also are, and I'm quite aware of the business pursuits of what you've got going on, and we haven't really focused on that, and it's not really the point of what we're talking about here today. But I happen to know that you have a lot going on professionally, and things are being knocked out of the park left and right. The number of seemingly impossible things that you go after in your business, but then make it happen is just amazing. On top of all of that, you've got all of these new things that you're bringing into your lifestyle. What have your kids said about this as they've witnessed this?
It's funny you ask. Last week we had a major issue with the dog. He swallowed a mango pit and it was not going to come out on its own, and we had to have surgery for it. And so $7,000 later, we have surgery to get the mango pit out of the dog's stomach, and we're sitting at home, and my 17-year-old says to me, Mom, I know it's $7,000, but there's a study that 40% of Americans don't have an extra $1,000 in an emergency fund. And so the fact that you have an extra $7,000 and can pay for the dog's surgery means that you're ahead of that many people. And I said, well, and how many of them are single moms that are solely financially responsible for 4 kids? And he's like, well, then you're in the top 1%, Mom. So the fact that my 17-year-old is the one telling me, is like, I know that what I'm doing must be right. I'm teaching them, I'm talking to them. We'll watch shows on TV where, there's a boyfriend, girlfriend that break up, and then one of them's dating someone else a week later. And my kids will say, Mom, they did not even take time to heal before they got into a new relationship. And my 19-year-old will say the same. Just she sees friends that are jumping into relationships and saying, Mom, but they're not even healing. So clearly the words that I use and the things that I'm doing to process things, while it's not taking immediately, it's definitely things that they're hearing, things that they're receptive to. Little pictures have big ears. And so they're showing it back to me. I should have written some more of the things down, but I mean, my 8-year-old was watching TV the other day. I said, Mom, that sounds like you. I said, well, why? What do you say? Said something about I am enough. And I'm like, I mean, I don't even say that, but she knows that all the things that I do are translating into like, we are enough. And so it's constantly doing that with your actions. It's not saying it. It's not saying I am enough. It's showing all of the things that like we're taking care of ourselves and going through that healing process of ourselves, because it's an ongoing journey for the rest of our lives. So how can we own that? How can we own our role in everything that we do also, and really like stand up for, hey, I did this wrong, or I did this right, or whatever it is, but owning your own stuff. And so all of that's, huge. And being a mom and having these wonderful kids that I love and adore is like what I was made for. But then it's also pretty cool to have all these other things too, that I have these personal goals, that I have these professional goals, and that it all is coming together. Like, the more intentional I am, the more it comes together.
What would you say are the top 2 or 3 tools that help you live this new identity in the world?
I mean, it's really for me personally, my own style is I'm all or nothing. So like I'm all in or I'm out. I don't really do things in the middle. And for me to do things all in, I need a coach to get there, a coach for whatever thing it is that I want to excel at, and I need to pay a premium for it. If I had a coach that was $20 a month, I'd probably not take it seriously. And where I pay for the people in my life that I want to help me get to the next level. I have a personal trainer. I pay for drop-in classes for my hot yoga, which is a premium. I don't stick to one studio. I follow my instructors because they are the ones that inspire me, and they're the ones that push me to do more, and they're like holding my hand. Pay a premium for my mastermind group. I have another business coach, and then I have my volleyball coach. And so I went from doing rec classes into now this class that I want to do tonight that's with a professional volleyball player. And so, and it's scary. It's continuing to up level that. And then even with paddleboarding, I'm debating if I want to sign up for this 8-week program to get better at paddleboarding. So it's a coach. Coaches that you pay a premium for, that hold me accountable. I show up. I have never flaked on any of them. I have never not shown up. I always do everything that I'm supposed to do, and I do it above and beyond. There's probably this teacher's pet mentality in there about that. And so that's what works for me in order to continue performing at that high level.
So what I heard is high level coaches, high premium so that there's lots of skin in the game. I
Mhm.
also heard the next level mastermind over at nextlevelmastermind.info, by the way, that you pay to have an incredibly high level peer group professionally. Would you also, how important and essential is your journaling and or vision boarding processes to your identity today?
It's huge. The vision board is the roadmap. I feel like I was lost before and didn't know what I wanted. Even when I was in Mexico, I didn't really know what the end goal was in Mexico. I was kind of just plugging along. And up until I created the vision board, I didn't really know what I wanted. I mean, even on the vision board is a vintage Bronco. So I see that. And as I hear other opportunities come up, I'm like, no, 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 I want a vintage Ford Bronco. And so it keeps you from being the ant that's distracted and going all over the place. You're like, no, 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 this is what I want. Now, whether or not that's the realistic thing is a different story. But that's something that's on there. And so it's helped me see very clearly. The journaling has helped with the processing of things. It's not taking things personally. It's finding the gratitude in things. I have a very intentional Instagram account. I have my account that, follows all of my friends and stuff. I call that from my old life. And then I have an account now that doesn't follow very many people because every single person that I follow is with intention so that when I open Instagram, I am inspired. So I know I'm going to probably save a couple quotes, I'm going to like a couple things, and I'm going to log out feeling more fulfilled. It's not a time suck. It's I'm going in with a targeted purpose and then I'm coming out. And it's usually to find inspiration in something. And so I'm surrounding myself by these successful people who have all of these quotes and things to share. And whether it's personal, whether it's professional or financial, I'm constantly writing in, adding it into my journals. And so all those things are making it in there as well. I also lead a book club with other entrepreneurial women. And so we talk about things, and then that comes into the journaling as well. So I would say the journaling is the processing of all of the things that are coming together to help make me a better me and to continue being clear about what I want and how far I've come. It's amazing that who we are today is not going, we think about the us in 5 years, it's not who I am right now. The me in 5 years is going to be a different me too. So what she even wants in 5 years may be different. And I can plan right now what I think I want in 5 years, but that future me is going to be a different me. And all of that is just mind blowing to me. But just looking through these few journals and seeing how much I've grown in the last year, I know that I'm going to be a different person another year and 2 and 3. So it's exciting. It actually gives me newfound excitement
So
about
so
life.
here are the tools that I've heard.
Mhm,
High level, high fee coaches,
mhm,
professional mastermind group,
mhm,
journaling, vision boarding, book club,
mhm,
and intentional social media account that
mhm.
only follows content and creators who inspire me, motivate me, and that fill me rather than the typical experience many people have in social media. Those are all incredible tools. And Michelle, is there anything that you want to promote for those who are being exposed to you for the first time here?
Sure, you can follow my inspirational journey. It's the fitness, it's the handstands, it's the all of the things that I've made it my mission to accomplish this year. It's not so much the deep professional side. The professional side is more reserved for the landlord tenant law side. So unless you're a landlord in California, it probably won't serve you, although there's fantastic content that is life changing for my clients who are specifically in California, and I help them every single day. But for the majority who just want that inspiration, who want to hear something different, it's my Instagram. So it's at the real Anne Michelle.
Wonderful. And I'll definitely have a link to that in the show notes. And Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. I know that many people will be inspired, and I encourage folks to send you a DM after they followed you and let you know that they really appreciated it as well. Many blessings to you. And thank you so much for being a part of the Next Level Mastermind and inspiring the people in our group as you do every single week.
Absolutely. I love being a part of it as always. Thanks, Cliff.
And that's going to wrap it up here, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the What Are You Creating podcast, brought to you and sponsored by the Next Level Mastermind. By the way, if you're a creator, full-time, self-employed, check out nextlevelmastermind.info, not .com, nextlevelmastermind.info. You can benefit from the education, experience, skills, talents, abilities, areas of expertise of other full-time self-employed business owners who understand life at your level. Join today, apply today at nextlevelmastermind.info. Until next time, we encourage you to take everything you do and what you're creating to the next level. Bye.